Hi, my name is Rich, and in this series I aim to show you some cool mechanics from video games, and how they can be used to make your game of D&D better. Be aware that these lessons can be applied to most forms of game design, not just Dungeons & Dragons, but this started out as a D&D channel, so that's what I'm going to try and focus on. Today we'll talk about Slay the Spire. It's a roguelike deck building game that starts you off with some basic cards and lets you build a full deck that will devastate any creature that gets in your way. Slay the Spire lets you progressively build your deck of cards as you make your way through branching pathways and random events. Much akin to a choose-your-own-adventure book, it was developed by Megacrit, mainly Anthony Giovannetti and Casey Yano. It's drawn comparisons to Netrunner and Dominion. They're both deck-building card games in the physical sense. One of the strengths of the game is the multiple synergies you can possibly get from the cards on offer. In Slay the Spire, when you get two cards, for example Juggernaut and Metallicize, they work together. One gives you block every turn, and the other deals damage when you gain block, so it's a win-win. When you're playing D&D with a group, everyone gets different spells and abilities. As a wizard, casting haste on a fighter lets them get an extra attack, letting the fighter deal more damage, and ties up whatever you're running out of range from. Another example of this is the Artificer class. The key to this class is that you can make magic items. You could beef yourself up into an unstoppable machine, but do you know any rogues that could use your boots of spider climb to sneak around and literally get the drop on an unsuspecting guard? This leads me to my next point. Each character in Slay the Spire has a pool of cards that are tailored towards their archetype. As a dungeon master, you should put thought into the magic items that you give your players. Sure, a +1 sword is functional, but homebrewing a dwarven warhammer that lets the user get a con save advantage when drinking ale and is coincidentally a +1 as well? I'm sure the Dwarven Cleric would love that, and it helps flavour the world and give more character to the weapons. As a DM, you have the power to pre-plan possible synergies between items, abilities, and different characters, and gently guide the players into coming up with them all by themselves. Who knows, they could find a use for the items you couldn't possibly imagine. The possible downside to tailored character items in video games is that if a player gets one ability or synergy that is overpowered, then they can become reliant on it in every situation, and this leads to a stale gameplay and repetition. Dungeons & Dragons, as a tabletop game, allows the DM to have the unique ability to adapt from session to session, or even on the fly. This lets the DM make sure the players are having as much or as little variety as they want. In video games that don't have randomized elements, like roguelikes, this can reduce the replayability and lead to a stale metagame of pick item X or you're not playing optimally. Don't be afraid to experiment. With Slay the Spire, a fight can usually last for 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes on harder fights. Each act lasts for 10 minutes to half an hour, and each overall game will be around 2 to 2.5 hours. The relatively short time investment into each game means that if you're trying something different and it doesn't work out, you don't have to worry about it. You'll learn something new in every run. This is conditioning the player into learning from their mistakes and helps make them feel like there is overarching progression, getting better at the game outside of each run. It's not about getting the more powerful item and seeing the number go up, it's more about increasing your skill as a player. This lesson can be applied to D&D in the sense of trying out different styles of games with your group until you find something they really enjoy. For example, one session could be a dungeon crawl filled with traps and encounters. The next could be completely focused on roleplay and the social consequences of their actions. The more you try out new things with a new group, the better you know them, and you can present the type of game they enjoy the most, giving them progress options. In Slay the Spire, after each encounter, be it a fight, a shop, a campfire, or a treasure chest, you get to choose between what you want to do next on a long branching path that always ends in a boss fight. From this, you can extrapolate that giving your players options of where to go next is always a good idea. Don't go too hard with this idea, because that could lead to railroading them into a set story, but make sure you inform them where they can go next. There is nothing worse than letting players decide what they want to do in a totally open-ended fashion, and then having them debate if they should stay in the tavern for the 4th day in a row. As a DM, all those cool encounters you've worked on will go to waste. Giving the player the illusion of choice, and adapting your set pieces to their choices is the goal. If you're interested in continuing the conversation, feel free to leave a comment down below, or check out the Discord linked in the description. If you'd like to check out the latest project I'm working on, it's a one-shot heist set in a museum, and I'm updating it regularly on Patreon. If you want to help support the channel monetarily, then feel free to buy me a coffee over on Patreon as well. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you next time. Goodbye.